Hey YouTube, Twig here, bringing you all an update to my Witchcrafter Yugioh deck profile for post the September 2024 ban list. Wanted to go for the 60 card Witchcrafter variant. This is actually an idea from one of my subscribers. I was interested after I saw the comment, so I figured why not, we'll give it a try. The Witchcrafter monsters have a focus on using their many different Witchcrafter spell cards and being able to add back those spell cards during the end phase or just activate it as the second effect for that turn for adding back the spell instead of using the actual effect of the Witchcrafter spell. So with cards like that grass is greener being off the, or that grass looks greener being off the ban list now, we have access to that spell setup that we can do with a 60 card deck and then just add back the needed spells for us to then use for the following turn. So let's go ahead and get started with the deck profile. It's always hard when there is a 60 card deck. This does not want to stay upright during the video, but let's go ahead and get started. For the main deck monsters, we're running 3 copies of Witchcrafter Pator. During the main phase quick effect, you can tribute this card, then discard 1 spell card to special summon 1 Witchcrafter monster from your deck, except for Pator. You can banish this card from your graveyard to draw 1 card, then send 1 Witchcrafter card from your hand to the graveyard, or if you have none, banish your entire hand. So once again, more graveyard setup, providing a banish card effect for you to use, and then also having a direct summon for our bigger Witchcrafter monsters that we also run in the deck. So a definite 3 of for just the overall setup that you can provide with Witchcrafter Pator. And also the 3 copies of Witchcrafter Pottery. During the main phase quick effect, you can tribute this card, then discard 1 spell, special summon 1 Witchcrafter monster from your deck, except for Pottery. If you have no cards in your hand, you can banish this card from your graveyard, then target 1 Witchcrafter card in your graveyard, add to your hand. Once again, set up again with the lower level monsters for the Witchcrafters in the graveyard, being able to then give you the banish option to target a Witchcrafter card in your graveyard and add it back to your hand as well. So with that immense graveyard setup that you can do with that grass looks greener, you have this search option available to you also. And then also the 3 copies of Witchcrafter Yugioh. This is something you'll see with the 60 card variants, just so you have the majority of cards to hit off of the mill power. During the main phase quick effect, you can tribute this card, discard 1 spell, and special summon 1 Witchcrafter monster from your deck except for Yugioh. You can banish this card and 1 Witchcrafter spell from your graveyard. This effect becomes that spell's effect when that card is activated. So this can give you access to the Witchcrafter spell you discarded as well in the graveyard, but once again, being a low level Witchcrafter, it has great graveyard setup for us to use also. And also the 3 copies of Witchcrafter's Schemata, with this card having the tribute and then discard of a spell to special summon a Witchcrafter monster from your deck. And then you can banish this card from your graveyard to send 1 Witchcrafter card from your deck to the graveyard, except for Schemata. So then you have the add back option for that Witchcrafter card you may have sent off of this card also. For our lower numbers for our Witchcrafter monsters, 2 copies of Witchcrafter Madame Vere. During damage calculation, if your spellcaster monster battles an opponent's monster, quick effect, you can reveal any number of spells with different names in your hand. If you do, your battling monster gains 1000 attack and defense for each of your revealed until the end of this turn. Then you can discard 1 spell, negate the effects of all face-up monsters your opponent currently controls until the end of this turn. So Madame Vere is your big boss monster in the deck, being able to rely on this card for the added search and setup that you can rely on for that protection of your cards, but also being able to have a monster effect negation of your opponent's cards also using this card. We're also running 2 copies of Witchcrafter Golem Aruru. When your opponent activates a card effect that targets a spellcaster monster you control, or targets it for an attack, quick effect, you can target 1 card your opponent controls or 1 Witchcrafter spell in your graveyard, special summon this card from your hand, and if you do, return the targeted card to the hand. You can use this effect of Golem Aruru once per turn, and once per turn during your opponent's standby phase, return this card to the hand. But being another level 8 monster, it does give us options with Madame Vere on the field to overlay into rank 8 Xyz plays with the special summon power it has, on top of just being able to use this card for more of a special summon resource, and then also returning the targeted Witchcrafter spell in our graveyard back to our hand also. More 2-ofs being 2 copies of Witchcrafter Adele. Quick effect, you can discard 1 spell card to special summon 1 Witchcrafter monster from your hand, except for Adele. You can tribute this card to target a spellcaster monster in your graveyard, except for Adele, and special summon it. So not only do you have the discard option to special, you have the tribute option, and it just being another easy resource that you can summon out with the tribute of some of your other lower level Witchcrafter monsters. With the last of the Witchcrafter monsters being 2 copies of Witchcrafter Hane. Your opponent cannot target other spellcasters you control with card effects. Quick effect, you can discard discard one spell, then target one face-up card your opponent controls, destroy it. You can only use this effect of Hain once per turn, but destruction as well with this card, using these spells that we may even add back as just other resources for them to use also. And more of the generic spellcaster lineups that we're running with it off the ban list. I'm trying out one Plush Fire. This is the out-of-date text it did receive in errata, so remember that. With this card, just having more of a special summon option and search for our other Performa mages, being the 3 copies of Damage Juggler, the 1 copy of Hat Tricker, and the 1 Trick Clown as well. Because once again, cards sent off of the mill for that Grasslook Screener, you have search power in the form of Damage Juggler and special summon back power in the form of Trick Clown. You don't really want to mill Plush Fire or Hat Tricker, but still, if you set up these cards, then you can search out the other 2, which most of the time goes in that order on how you want to search them. And for the last of the Spellcaster Engine, I'm also running 3 copies of Magician's Soul and 3 copies of Illusion of Chaos. Just more of a special summon resource setup on the field with our level 1 monster, and being able to also send spell and traps from our hand or field to the graveyard to draw 2 cards gives us more of an engine to sift through, while also being able to make use of those cards we sent to the graveyard to then add back again. That is it for the main deck monsters. We'll now move on to the spells. I run 3 copies of Witchcrafter's Creation. Add 1 Witchcrafter monster from your deck to your hand. During your end phase, if you control a Witchcrafter monster, while this card's in your graveyard, you can add this card to your hand. You can only use 1 Witchcrafter Creation effect per turn, and only once that turn. That's the theme you're going to see with these Witchcrafter spells. You can either add them back or activate their main effect, but that's also where that Grasslook Screener play comes in, because then you'll have the add back power, or, you know, of all the many different spells we may have sent to the graveyard from the deck also. And we're also running 3 copies of Witchcrafter Draping. Target 1 spell or traps your opponent controls up to the number of Witchcrafter monsters you control. Return those targets to the hand. During end phase, if you control a Witchcrafter monster while it's in the graveyard, you can add this card to your hand. More add back power just by controlling a Witchcrafter monster, and then bounce power depending on how many we have against our opponent also. And 3 copies of Witchcrafter's Scroll. Being a continuous spell, we can also make use of it with Magician's Soul. And once per turn, when your spellcaster monster destroys a monster by battle, you can draw 1 card. You can only use this effect, one of the effects of Scroll per turn, only once that turn. If a Witchcrafter monster you control would discard to activate their effect, you can send this card from the field to the graveyard instead, and then also having the add back power. And lastly, for the 3 copies of Witchcrafter Unveiling. Special summon 1 Witchcrafter monster from your hand, and if you do, your opponent can activate card or effects in response to this card's activation of spellcaster monster effects for the rest of this turn. And during that phase, having the add back power as well if you control the Witchcrafter monster. So just being the special summon option, and then more of a restriction about what your opponent can do against it. For some of the lower numbers for our Witchcrafter cards, 2 copies of Witchcrafter Holiday. Target 1 Witchcrafter monster in your graveyard, special summon it. During end phase, having the add back power as well. So while you'll have the setup quite done with that Grasslook Screener, you have a special summon option in the form of Witchcrafter Holiday to summon it back onto the field also. And for our one-ofs for our Witchcrafter spells, the 1 copy of By Street, the 1 copy of Collaboration, and our fusion spell, Witchcrafter Confusion Confession. I only run the 1 of the fusion spell because you have a, I would say, better and consistent option with this form of the deck, which we'll get to in just a bit for our spells. But for the other generic spells we run in the deck, 3 copies of Magician's Restage. With this card, you can target 1 level 3 or lower spellcaster monster in your graveyard, special summon it. This effect can only be used once while this card's face up on the field, but that's not really a big problem because then we have other resources to be able to send them afterwards. And also the 1 copy of Magician's Left Hand and Magician's Right Hand for spell and trap prevention as well. If you didn't want to run these cards, you could always try Secret Village of the Spellcaster as just another lockdown spell to use in the field spell zone, and then maybe a Terraforming to search it out. And also our main go-to card in the deck, and that is that Grasslook Screener. If you have more cards in your deck than your opponent does, send cards from the top of your deck to the graveyard so you have the same number of cards in your deck as your opponent. So you have this setup. This is a really, really fun card to use successfully in this deck, which I'll do an end of the video, combo where we're just milling cards to see what we have consistency-wise, but to search out the card, 3 copies of Left Arm Offering as well. Giving up the 2 cards in our hand to search out this card can be an immense search playthrough, so just giving up those and then hitting more of the bigger resources. With the last of our spells, my other preferred fusion spell in the deck being Magicalized Fusion, just for the fact that with all the spellcasters we can set up in the graveyard, we can easily summon out our Witchcrafter Vice Madame, or even our Quintet Magician as an even bigger boss monster. And that is it for the immense main deck. We'll now move on to the extra deck. Running 3 copies of Witchcrafter Vice Madame, needing 1 Witchcrafter monster and 1 Spellcaster monster. When a spell or effect of a non-fusion Spellcaster monster effect is activated, quick effect, you can activate one of these effects. You can only use each effect of Vice Madame once per turn. You can destroy 1 card on the field, or special summon 1 level 6 or lower Witchcrafter monster from your hand or deck, or you can add 1 Witchcrafter spell or trap from your graveyard to your hand. Add back power and getting around the add back of the spell, so then we can use that spell. I run 3 of this just so we can also use the effect of our fusion spell. If it's in the graveyard and set up and set there, we can then add this card back and then just reuse it again also. I have the 1 copy of the Quintet Magician with Magicalized Fusion, just needing 5 spellcasters, can be easily done in this deck as well, especially after that Grass Looks Greener play. The 1 copy of Relinquished Anima, along with the 1 Almirage, the 1 IP Masquerena, the 1 Silhouette Rabbit, along with the 1 Barricade Board Blocker, with the other Link monsters being 1 Lena the Light Charmer Lustrous, 1 Dark the Dark Charmer, 1 Donner Dagger for Hire, and the 1 Access Code Talker, with our Xyz monsters being the 1 copy of number 38 and the 1 copy of Ghost Trick Alucard. If you didn't want to run Alucard, I like it for the back row destruction. We don't really have that much in the deck. You can always put in a Zeus instead to overlay over the number 38 once you've used the spell negation of your opponents and you have a good amount of materials built up also. But the big play that we were probably all waiting to see happen is the setup for your deck. So once again, if you're going up against a deck that has, let's say, 40 cards, and you have your 60 card That Grass Looks Greener play, you will have a 20 card difference after both drawing your cards, depending on if your opponent searched anymore, but if you go first against them. So you either have the left arm offering search to then be able to get the search of this card from your deck to your hand, giving up the other cards in your hand, but then you have still the additional search. So let's just say you open up That Grass Looks Greener. You shuffled your deck, and now you are sending off the 20 cards. So you're going 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, and then we'll just go a little faster, 8, 9, 10, 11, 12, 13, 14, 15, 16, 17, 18, 19, 20. So from that play alone, we hit a good number of the low level. We have the banish options for all of the Witchcrafter lower level monsters that we milled off, having those banish options to either have search and setup. We have the Plush Fire being an additional search. We have the add back power of cards like our Creation, our Scroll, our Buy Street, and then also our Unveiling as well during the end phase. So from there we have these 8 monster setups. We have plenty of other spellcasters for banish plays for the fusion cards, which once again we didn't even hit one of the fusion spells, which can still be drawn off of what has now become the normal standard size deck. Having all that search back power, if you were to use the left arm offering combo to add That Grass Looks Greener, you would have less cards to search, or at least 1 less card, but from the end phase, you'd be able to make up a good majority of what you gave up for your hand on top of the additional monster effects that we have for that additional search also. It's that search and setup that really makes this deck very, very fun when you can set up That Grass Looks Greener as the additional play to go for in the deck also. But that is it for the deck profile. I hope you all enjoyed. Like I said, this was an awesome deck to build. I'm glad for that suggestion in the comment section down below for it also. But as I said before also, I'm taking recommendations for other decks you'd like to see with the updates from the ban list, so definitely do let me know. And as always, until next time, please do not forget to leave a like and subscribe, and Kira Twig out.